Okay, well, good morning. It's great to see you here today. We have a lot of good work to do today. I'm going to share some thoughts to get started. I want to thank you for joining with me and your fellow students and faculty and staff to engage in this day of listening and learning. The Planning Committee and so many others have worked extremely hard to develop a very rich program of events. I'm so impressed with the schedule for today. I'm so impressed. And I want to take a moment to thank them. The planning team includes Abby Hollerman, Lisa Johnston, Gabriel Baranacci, Trish Moser, Destiny Lott, Sophia Macias, Peg Cornwell, and Mickey Meyer. So thanks to all of them. In addition, over 30 faculty, administrators, staff, and students participated in shaping the vision and themes for the day. I mean, that program is so rich. So please raise your hand if you're part of leading a session today. Yes, let's give them a round of thanks and applause. So 26 programs were submitted for the summit this year from across the college, and we'll also be displaying a few educational posters during the event. And because of the high number of very high quality programs submitted, we're going to be offering a Beyond the Summit workshop series for further discussion on advancing racial justice after today. I want to call out a special thanks to Dr. Eric Smaw for organizing that debate last night. That was just fantastic. Thank you very much. And to all of to our entire debate team, which is now #1 in the nation. Fantastic. That was a proud moment. And also, I want to thank in advance Dr. Eric Zivit for working with so many faculty and staff and students to produce a reading of Othello tonight. I very much look forward to that and hope that you'll come and see that too. So, also my thanks to Dorcas Gilmore, class of 2000, who flew down from DC to join us to serve as the keynote for one of our lunch sessions. So thank you very much. Where is she? Is she here? Not yet. Okay. Well, I'm both humbled and inspired by the commitment and vision shown by all of you. So I begin today with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. This is a quote. "Men often hate each other because they fear each other. And they fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they cannot communicate. They cannot communicate because they're separated." Today, we will practice working together, not separation. We will practice dialogue and communication, all as a means to come to understand one another more deeply so that we do not fear those who see the world differently. And so, in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King, we can, each in our own way, expand our capacity for love so much that it leaves no space for hate. Today is a teach-in, a concentrated opportunity for listening to and learning from one another. Everyone here is a learner, everyone a teacher. As a student at Morehouse College in 1947, Dr. King wrote in the student newspaper, quote, "The function of education, therefore, is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. But education which stops with efficiency may prove the greatest menace to society. The most dangerous criminal may be a man gifted with reason but with no morals. Intelligence plus character, that is the true goal of education." At Rollins College, we are a diverse community of learners on purpose. We intentionally seek to welcome students and faculty and staff who represent a diversity of identities, racial and ethnic and religious and gender and national and political and socioeconomic, because we believe, we know, that only by learning with and from people who see the world differently can we fulfill our mission with integrity. The respectful sharing of different points of view is essential to our mission. It's actually the essence of our mission. Everyone's thinking is improved by critical exchange and listening to alternate points of view. Now, the flip side of this core value is that there's no place in this community, in any community of learners, for racism, homophobia, gender bias, religious intolerance, or other kinds of prejudice that exist in larger societies around us, and that we find at times emerging in our own campus community. These forms of prejudice inflict harm not just on members of our own community, but in the case of liberal arts colleges, to our very purpose. These forms of prejudice preclude rather than foster the seeking of knowledge and understanding. They close minds rather than open them. And they can make our campuses hostile climates for some of our members. This hostility, in turn, undermines their ability and their right to thrive here, to contribute fully and freely, even as they seek their own aspirations. Now, every form of racism or prejudice is a manifestation of ignorance. Now, as a liberal arts college, we do not expect our students or faculty or staff, and here I certainly include myself, to be free of ignorance or to arrive without gaps or lapses in understanding. Education is a process, a quest to replace ignorance with understanding. And as such, it's never finished, never complete. This being the case, today and every day is a time for being highly tolerant of untested ideas, incomplete theories, ungrounded beliefs, or opinions that aren't fully informed. But, and this is the point, by engaging in this community of learners as a participant in our common project, we all must expect to have our partial understanding challenged, our untested ideas tested, and yes, sometimes our ignorance called out vigorously and passionately. Now, every person here today, every member of our campus community, engages our mission with a racial identity. Many of them are contested, many are complex or in flux, some are understood by those who embody them, and some are not. Now, I am aware that I am a white male, and I move through the world benefiting doubly from unearned privileges and advantages. One of the privileges of my particular embodiment is that I rarely find myself in social situations where I need to think about my racial identity. This dynamic, this feature of white hegemony is, I believe, why so many well-intentioned white people are attracted to the idea of colorblindness as an ethical ideal. I've had generations of students, white students, proclaim with all sincerity that they don't see race, that they accept people for their particular and individual qualities, and that race does not matter. Well, I'm suggesting that race does matter. That it matters to persons of color because they have to negotiate their pursuits and aspirations in a global social order where prejudice and racism are deeply and structurally ingrained. And that it matters to white people because we continue to benefit undeservedly in big ways and small by the accident of our racial identities. When King proclaims that he has a dream that, quote, his 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, he is not calling for a nation that is colorblind, but for racial justice. For a nation where privileges and benefits and advantages are not distributed according to race. This is most certainly not the case in our nation or on our campus today. And it's hard to find evidence that the situation is improving. I am suggesting that as we engage the life and thought of Dr. Martin Luther King, that we strive to adopt this ethical stance of being critically aware of our own racial identities. I'm suggesting that respecting one another entails being aware of one another's racial realities. But I would go further. I would also suggest that failing to do so is intentionally or unintentionally, is for some, an exercise of racial privilege. If you want to respect the dignity and individuality of your fellow members of this community of learners, acknowledge that their racial realities are at least partially constitutive of their identities, and that these identities, for some, are not wholly chosen, but in some measure socially ascribed, layered with histories that have advantaged some and disadvantaged others. Put in this way, respect, real respect, is not easy, and it is sometimes not comfortable. I often think about the truth and reconciliation process in South Africa as they struggled to emerge from apartheid. The theory of social change here is that it would have been impossible to move forward from a long history of structural injustice towards a new history of racial equality. Impossible to move forward from a regime of racial terror to one of racial justice without a public airing of the truth. That is, reconciliation and restorative justice require as a prerequisite the speaking and owning of the history of injustice. Now, South Africa is no multiracial utopia today. Far from it, deep problems and persistent struggles remain. But I don't believe our own nation has come anywhere close to having our own process of truth and reconciliation, our own program of restorative justice. Yes, we have made gestures that implicitly admit of horrendous historical wrongs, gestures towards desegregation and civil rights and affirmative action. But we have not collectively and structurally, as a society, come to terms with the historical roots of white privilege and its persistent influence. We have not come to terms with discrimination and the multiple inequalities that are distributed by race. Look at demographics of longevity by race. Look at educational attainment by race, distribution of wealth by race, or, of course, incarceration by race. And it's impossible not to see evidence that our own regime of racial terror that lay at the foundation of our nation has not been reconciled. And I maintain this is because, in part, we have not really owned the truth about our own history. So, in closing, these sessions that have been planned for this summit represent so many efforts to face these difficult truths. Surely they're not a solution for our nation, not even for our campus, but each session, each conversation, each advance in mutual understanding can be a restorative action, and collectively they can mobilize us for more. So thank you for being here, for being in this conversation. May today be a new beginning for Rollins. Thank you. Because this is a day for dialogue and exchange, I'd like to just open the floor for a little while to see if there are comments or questions before we move on to Mamta Kapadi, I think, who follows me. Would anybody like to offer a comment or question or counterpoint or observation? Oriana, please.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Dr. Cornwell, I just want to thank you. In 10 years of service at Rollins College, I have never heard an administrator speak that candidly and directly with our community about diversity, inclusion, and equity on this campus, and I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Maybe while the next speaker is thinking about things, I'll just comment that, I've been working on these questions both philosophically and in praxis for, 25 some years. And I think probably like you, many of you, sometimes it's demoralizing because progress seems not only slow, but progress seems ephemeral. We work so hard to achieve a step forward, and as soon as you turn your back to move on to something else, history fills in behind you and you're back, it feels like you're back to where you are. So, what I've come to believe about this work is that it's always with us, right? And I think it's tempting, desirable even, to think that we can have a kind of collective commitment and we can create change at Rollins and that change will stick. And then we can continue to move forward. What I actually believe is that change won't stick unless we're constantly vigilant, constantly committed. There are changes that we can make that are material changes, like the representation of underrepresented groups at Rollins, that we can make that will be a change that we can build upon. But cultural change, addressing the real underlying dynamics that we're talking about today, we're going to be in this the whole time that we're here. And we have to sign up for that. And I have signed up for that. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. Whilst you were talking, I forgot everything I wanted to say.
Sorry.
No, it's just something I wanted to share. The fact that when you were talking, at a certain point, you made a statement, and I wanted to clap. And then I just held back. And I asked myself, why did I hold back? I mean, why wasn't I free enough to clap my hands? And maybe other people would have clapped when I did that. And I thought, well, let me keep not say everything, but just to think that I had some thoughts about what could have prevented me from clapping my hands at the time you're talking. But I'll give you another example and kind of, say what I wanted to say. I come originally from Ghana, and so I grew up in a place where everybody looked like me, and I never thought about prejudice and discrimination and all of that until I arrived in the United States. And then I suddenly began to think about the color of my skin, where what I say would probably be construed differently because of who I am and because of the accent I have. And not that all of us don't have an accent anyway. It depends on what side of the fence you come from. But I also realized I worked in other countries in Africa, and I still realized that there was prejudice. I've worked in South Africa, and I've felt discrimination from white South Africans, but I've also felt discrimination from black South Africans because they were marginalized for a long time, and then suddenly here comes a professor who is teaching in one of their universities and kind of taking their jobs away from them. So I think what you said about understanding where the other person is and being able to talk together with other people instead of being separated, that's really what did it for me. And one application for me is to find out what is a white experience.
Yes.
Because I can be thinking about my own experiences and the discrimination and prejudice and all of that. And I feel that all the time. But I need to think about what is a white experience, and understand it and understand how white people think and how they interact with people. And that will probably help me as I negotiate all the interactions that I have on campus and outside.
Indeed. Thank you, Dr. Kodzi. So let me just, this is what today's about, right? Let me just engage in a conversation with you because I completely understand why you didn't clap, right? And we should name this because I think it's healthy to do so. What you heard, there are cultural discourse norms, okay? I'm a middle-aged white guy. That's the way I talk, It was quite formal. It was a mode of communication that is familiar in the academy. I thoroughly recognize that it's very situated speech. And there are other kinds of venues where more audience interaction would have been completely appropriate. And in fact, interestingly you say that, because as I was working through my text, I was thinking, I wonder if they're out there. I would like to hear some rejoinder. But I wasn't really allowing it by the form of discourse that I chose to convey those ideas. Now, I would submit that, in a college context, you want to have space where all manner of different kinds of discourse are not just permissible, but understood. So I would have been totally fine if you clapped. In fact, I would have found it very affirming. But yeah. But I also completely understand. I completely understand what you're saying about why you didn't in that setting. So, well, I don't want to take up. Is there anybody else that would?
We have time for about 1 to 2 more.
Sure. There's a couple down here or one there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm May Fitchett, for those of you who do not know me. I've been here since 1998. Am I too short? All right. Okay. Thank you. So I'm probably the person that many would recall when I am invited at the table or to discussions like this to share some of my experiences at Rollins and in the community. While I appreciate our dialogue, and I hope we continue it, so when you hear me, I'm probably at a different place, like I'm ready for some action, okay? And I mean action in terms of it's time that we really look at our community here, and are we intentional about inclusion and diversity? And how do we make that happen if we want that here? How do we improve that? And I'm ready to engage, to help in any way that I can to make that happen. So just to share my space, and Dr. Kazi is right, we all have different experiences. These brown faces, black faces, we come to the table with different experiences about race in America. It is different for someone who comes from another country, comes from the Caribbean, very different than the American experience. And I know you'll hear that today. Thank you, Dr. Cornwell. I think, President Court, you've been awesome. I really appreciate this, as Oriana said, first time, and I have hope. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just make one comment, because I think that what you say is exactly spot on. But I also want to just sort of send out an alert, right? That action at Rollins will mean doing things differently. And doing things differently in some cases is going to disrupt our norms. And disrupting those norms is going to be uncomfortable for some. And they're going to say, because, man, I've been here, they're going to say, oh no, I wanted to achieve that end, but I didn't mean this. I didn't want to give up this. I didn't want to not do this. Or wait, we've always done it this way. I'm all for the goal, but don't ask me to do that. And so this path is not a smooth one. And yet it's the path we have to take. So thank you for that. Please.
Thank you very much. As a native Floridian and obviously African American, I know racism very well. You mentioned public airing of the truth. So thank you for this forum. The young lady back there mentioned dialogue is not enough, and she's right. It begins with participation. So this step here today is a step in the right direction. I am a Holt student here at Rollins, and I've been here for several years and have experienced various degrees of racism. It exists, let's face it, it exists. So I thank you for your boldness, your passion, and your genuine sincerity to make a change, to mirror this campus, not only to the community, but to the globe. And so I think Rollins' legacy began the day you took office. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that. I appreciate, thank you for your response to these. Thank you for those comments. I am sure that, I mean, they're very humbling, and I assure you that I cannot make that big of a difference by myself. This is something we all have to be in together, and it will take time, and it will be hard. But one more? Sure, please.
Good morning. Carlene Sterling, Crummer Graduate School. Thank you again for being so visible since you've been here. And I want to go back to my fellow colleagues' statements on intentionality and participation. And I know I may be jumping the gun a bit as you think about your strategic plan and the process starting in the fall. Do you foresee any formal structures similar to what we had in terms of a formal multicultural department outside of the Diversity Council to address something that you said in your closing statement about structures in place to address issues of inclusion and diversity? Do you see that as part of your strategic plan?
Right. So, important question, and what I'm going to try to offer an answer is also important, I think, as I see strategic planning. I don't enter this process with any designs in mind. I think that what we choose to do differently as a college is going to have to emerge out of a process. I know about a lot of different structural, organizational things that are done elsewhere that aren't done here. I hope we explore those. But what's particularly right for Rollins is something that will come out of the process. I don't go into it with a design in mind. There are some structural changes that we do need to make that will change the demography of who's at Rollins. That has to be the first step. Because we can't achieve our mission, well, we can't achieve our mission, we can't even get the work going if we remain so predominantly white, both in our student body and in our faculty and staff. So those are structural changes that I think we can get about, in advance of any kind of strategic planning because it's just obvious. Then what we do with that will be something that's more difficult. So I'm gonna stop now because there's other folks on the program. It's a great day. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being engaged, and I very much appreciate it.